The alarm on the bridge of the human starship Defiance started screaming at 3 in the morning. Commander Yuna was asleep in a cabin when it happened. She jumped out of bed, pulled on her boots, and ran to the bridge in under a minute. Her black hair was messy, and her eyes were still heavy with sleep, but her mind was already sharp. "What do we have?" she asked as she stepped onto the bridge. Sujin, the pilot, turned in her chair. She was a small woman with quick hands and even quicker reflexes. "Distress signal, Commander, coming from Vector 7, the mining colony." Yuna walked to the main screen. The signal was weak and full of static, but the message was clear enough. Reactor meltdown. Radiation spreading. 12,000 colonists trapped underground. 72 hours until total collapse. "How far are we?" Yuna asked. 6 hours at maximum speed, Sujin answered. "Any other ships closer?" Dohan, the chief engineer, checked his console. He was a tall man with tired eyes and hands that were always covered in grease. "No, Commander, we're the only ones." Yuna nodded slowly. She looked at the data on the screen. The numbers were bad. The radiation levels were climbing fast. The tunnels were collapsing. The reactor was failing. By all logic, those 12,000 people were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. But Yuna had never been very good at accepting logic when lives were on the line. "Set course for Vector 7, she said. "Maximum speed." Sujin hesitated for just a moment. "Commander, the Coalition has already classified this as a lost cause. They're not even attempting a rescue." "I know," Yuna said. "We're going anyway." The bridge was quiet. Everyone looked at their commander. She was not a tall woman. She was not loud or dramatic. But when she gave an order, people listened. There was something in her eyes that made you believe she could do anything. Within minutes, the Defiance changed course and jumped to maximum speed. The ship shook as the engines pushed harder than they were designed to push. Yuna stood at the center of the bridge and watched the stars blur past. An hour into the journey, a communication came through. It was from Admiral Thalos of the Galactic Coalition. The Varani were an insectoid species, tall and thin with large compound eyes. They were known for their logic and their calculations. Thalos appeared on the screen, his mandibles clicking as he spoke. "Commander Yuna," he said, "we have received word that you are heading to Vector 7. I must advise against this course of action." "Thank you for your advice, Admiral," Yuna said politely. "You do not understand," Thalos continued. "Our best analysts have studied the situation. The radiation levels, the structural damage, the timeline. There is no possible way to save those colonists. Any rescue attempt will only result in more deaths. Your deaths." Yuna listened. She did not interrupt. When Thalos finished speaking, she simply nodded. "I understand your concerns, Admiral. But we're going anyway." Thalos's compound eyes seemed to flicker with confusion. "Why? The mathematics are clear. You cannot succeed." Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, calm and confident. "Admiral, we've got this." There was a long silence. Thalos looked at her through the screen, trying to understand. Behind him, other Coalition officers were whispering to each other. None of them understood what she meant. "What does that phrase mean?" Thalos finally asked. "It means we're going to try," Yuna said. "It means those people need help, and we're the only ones who can give it. It means we don't give up just because the odds are bad. But the odds are not merely bad," Thalos said. "They are impossible. Then we'll do the impossible." Thalos stared at her for a long moment. Then he slowly shook his head. "I will never understand humans," he said quietly. "But I will. Observe. Perhaps we can learn something from your attempt, even if it fails." "You do that, Admiral," Yuna said. "Yuna out." The screen went dark. Yuna turned to face her crew. There were 42 humans on the Defiance. 42 people who had just heard her promise the impossible. You all heard that, she said. The coalition thinks we're going to die. Maybe they're right. I'm not going to lie to you and say this will be easy. It won't be. It might be the hardest thing any of us have ever done. She paused and looked at each of them. But there are 12,000 people on that colony. Families, children, people who woke up this morning thinking it was just another day. They're scared right now. They're waiting for someone to save them. And we're the only ship close enough to try. Dohan stepped forward. What do you mean, Commander? Yuna looked at him. Everything. I need you to tear this ship apart if you have to. Build me radiation shields. Build me rescue equipment. Build me miracles. Dohan grinned. It was the grin of a man who loved impossible challenges. I'll get started. Hajin, the medical officer, raised her hand. She was a quiet woman with gentle hands and a sharp mind. I'll prepare the medical bay, and I'll train volunteers for emergency treatment. Sujin cracked her knuckles. Just tell me where to fly, Commander. I'll get us there. One by one, every crew member spoke up. They volunteered for extra shifts. They offered their skills, their time, their energy. Nobody complained. Nobody asked what they would get in return. They simply got to work. Yuna watched them go. Her heart was full of pride. Somewhere out in space, 17 alien ships were already moving to watch. The Velrani wanted to study human failure. The Keth were opening betting pools. The Morath were preparing their recording equipment. None of them believed the humans would succeed, but none of them had ever heard a human say, "We've got this," before. They didn't know what those words meant. They didn't understand that for humans, giving up was never the first option. It wasn't even the last option. It simply wasn't an option at all. The Defiance flew on through the stars, carrying 42 humans toward the impossible. And somewhere on Vexor 7, 12,000 people were waiting to be saved. Word spread fast through the galaxy. The humans were trying to save Vexor 7. The humans were attempting the impossible. Within hours, 17 alien ships had changed course to watch. Admiral Thello stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Velrani cruiser Certainty. Around him, his officers were monitoring every transmission from the human ship. They watched with the cold curiosity of scientists studying a strange experiment. They have not slept, one officer reported. It has been 14 hours since they received the distress signal. None of them have slept. Thalos clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Humans require sleep to function. Their efficiency will drop. Yes, Admiral. But they are not stopping. On another ship, the Keth traders were busy. They were amphibious creatures with smooth skin and large dark eyes. They loved two things above all else: profit and entertainment. And right now, the humans were providing both. Current odds against the humans, announced the lead trader, are 47-1. Any takers? Dozens of Keth rushed forward with their credits. Everyone was betting against the humans. The math was clear. The situation was impossible. Easy money dot, but one old Keth in the corner did not bet. He simply watched the screens with a strange look in his eyes. He had traded with humans before. He had seen them do things that made no sense. And he had learned never to bet against them far away. On a silent ship made of black metal, the Morath observed in their ancient way. They were old, so old that they had watched stars be born and die. They recorded everything important that happened in the galaxy. And they had decided that this moment was important. The humans are fascinating, said one Morath to another. They know they will fail, yet they try anyway. Perhaps, the other replied, they do not know they will fail. Perhaps they simply refuse to believe it. On the Defiance, nobody cared about the Watchers. They were too busy working. Dohan had turned the engineering bay into a factory. 3 shuttles lay in pieces on the floor. He and his team were ripping out every useful part and turning them into something new. Radiation shields, emergency seals, portable generators. "This won't be pretty," Do-Hwan muttered as he welded two mismatched pieces of metal together. "But it'll work." Beside him, young Tassin was working as fast as he could. He was only 19 years old, fresh from the academy. His hands were shaking from exhaustion and fear. But he didn't stop. "Is this right?" he asked, holding up a piece of wiring. Do-Hwan glanced at it. "Close enough. Install it." "But the manual says..." "Forget the manual. The manual is for people who have time. We don't have time. If it works, it's right." Tassin nodded and got back to work. He was learning more in these few hours than he had learned in 2 years at the academy. In the ship's kitchen, something strange was happening. Myra, the cook, was also building things. She had no engineering training. She had never built anything more complicated than a sandwich. But she had found a video tutorial on emergency welding, and now she was helping. "This is crazy," said one of the crew members watching her. "Probably," Myra agreed without looking up. "Hand me that torch. You're a cook. And right now, I'm a cook who can weld. Funny how that works." She finished her piece and held it up. It was rough and ugly, but it would hold. "See? Not so hard." The crew member shook his head in amazement. Then he found his own tutorial and started learning 2 dot. This was happening all over the ship. People were learning new skills in hours. They were doing jobs they had never done before. They were making mistakes and fixing them and making more mistakes. But they kept going. Commander Yuna walked through the ship, checking on every team. She hadn't slept either. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was steady. "How are we doing?" she asked Hajin in the medical bay. Hajin looked up from her work. She had converted a storage room into an emergency treatment center. 20 crew members were learning basic medical care from videos she had put together. "We'll be ready," Hajin said. "It won't be perfect, but we'll be ready." "Perfect is for people with time," Yuna said with a small smile. "Good enough is good enough." She moved on to the bridge, where Sujin was still at the pilot's seat. The young woman's eyes were fixed on the navigation screen. "We'll reach Vector 7 in 2 hours, Sujin reported. "But Commander, the approach is going to be rough. The radiation and debris. I'll have to fly through an asteroid field at high speed. One wrong move and we're dead. Can you do it?" Sujin was quiet for a moment. Then she cracked her knuckles and smiled. "I can do anything once." Yuna put a hand on her shoulder. "That's all we need." Out in space, the watching aliens were recording everything. They saw the humans working without rest. They saw ordinary people learning impossible skills. They saw a crew of 42 preparing to face certain death with smiles on their faces. Admiral Thelos watched the feeds with growing confusion. "They should be panicking," he said. "They should be arguing about whether to continue. Why are they laughing?" His officer had no answer. On the Defiance, someone had started singing. It was an old Earth song, something about not giving up. One by one, other voices joined in. Soon, the whole ship was singing as they worked. The Keth traders heard the singing through their intercepts. "What is this?" one asked. "It is called music," another answered. "Humans make it when they're happy, or sad, or scared, or for no reason at all. They are flying towards certain death and they are singing?" "Yes." The Keth looked at each other. For the first time, some of them started to wonder if they had made the right bet. The Morath recorded the singing carefully. They had seen many species face extinction. They had seen panic and despair and quiet acceptance. But they had never seen this. They had never seen a species respond to impossible odds by making music together. "They are remarkable," one Morath said softly. "They are insane," another replied. Perhaps, the first one answered. Those are the same thing. The Defiance flew on through the dark. In 2 hours, they would reach Vector 7. In 2 hours, they would attempt the impossible. 42 humans against mathematics itself, and not one of them was ready to give up. The Defiance entered the atmosphere of Vector 7 like a falling star. The ship was not designed for this kind of landing. It was a deep space vessel, built for the cold silence between worlds. But Sujin did not care what it was designed for. She only cared about what it could do. Hold on to something, she shouted as the ship hit the first layer of turbulence. The whole vessel shook. Metal screamed. Alarms started blaring from every console. Somewhere in the back, a compartment decompressed with a terrible hissing sound. We lost Section 7. Dohan reported from engineering. Can we still fly? Yuna asked. Barely. Then we keep going. Sujin's hands moved over the controls with impossible speed. Sweat ran down her face. Her muscles burned from holding the ship steady. Outside the windows, fire and smoke filled the sky. Debris from the damaged colony flew past them like bullets. Radiation levels are climbing, Hejin announced. We need to land soon. I'm trying. Sujin snapped. The asteroid field appeared out of nowhere. Chunks of rock and metal spinning through the air, torn from the planet's surface by the explosions. Any one of them could tear the Defiance apart. On the watching ships, Admiral Thalos leaned forward. They cannot survive this, he said quietly. The debris field is too dense. But Sujin did not know the meaning of cannot. She dove the ship between two massive rocks, rolled to avoid a spinning piece of metal, and pulled up just in time to miss crashing into the ground. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. But she was smiling. That was amazing, Tayson yelled from somewhere in the back. That was the easy part, Sujin replied. Landing is next. She brought the Defiance down 2 kilometers from the colony entrance. It was not a graceful landing. The ship hit the ground hard, bounced twice, and slid for almost half a kilometer before stopping. 3 more compartments were destroyed. The landing gear was gone. The hull was cracked in a dozen places, but they were down. They were alive. Yuna was the first one moving. Everyone to stations. Rescue teams suit up. We leave in 5 minutes. The crew jumped into action. People were bleeding from cuts and bruises. Some of them could barely stand. But nobody complained. They just got to work. Outside, the surface of Vector 7 was a nightmare. The sky was dark with smoke and ash. The ground was cracked and glowing with heat from underground fires. The radiation readings would have killed most species in hours. Humans could survive longer. Not safely. Not without damage. But longer. Yuna led the first team toward the colony entrance. Beside her walked Dohwan, Hajin, and 8 volunteers. They wore radiation suits that Dohan had patched together from spare parts. The suits were ugly and uncomfortable, but they would work. For a while. Stay close, Yuna ordered. Watch your readings. If anyone hits critical levels, they go back to the ship immediately. No arguments. The entrance to the colony was half collapsed. A massive pile of rocks and metal blocked the main tunnel. It would take hours to clear with proper equipment. The humans did not have proper equipment. They had their hands and their determination. Start digging, Yuna said. They dug. They lifted rocks with their bare hands. They used metal poles as levers. They worked in the choking dust and the deadly radiation, and they did not stop. After 2 hours, they broke through. The tunnel beyond was dark and filled with smoke. Strange sounds echoed from deep inside. The sounds of crying. The sounds of fear. Hello? Yuna called out. Can anyone hear me? We're here to help. Silence. Then, from somewhere ahead, A weak voice answered. "Help? Is someone there?" "We're coming," Yuna shouted back. "Hold on, we're coming." They pushed deeper into the tunnels. The air grew hotter. The radiation grew stronger. Yuna's suit started beeping warnings, but she ignored them. The first survivors they found were Keth children. 8 of them, huddled together in what had once been a classroom. The walls were cracked. The ceiling was sagging. The room could collapse at any moment. The children looked up with huge, terrified eyes. They were sick from radiation. Some of them could barely move. Hejin knelt down beside them. She did not speak their language, but she smiled, soft and warm and full of kindness. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a chocolate bar. Real chocolate from Earth. She had been saving it for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. She broke the chocolate into pieces and offered it to the children. They looked at her with confusion. Then, slowly, one of them reached out and took a piece. "It's okay," Hejin said gently. "We've got this. You're going to be okay." The child did not understand the words, but it understood the tone. It understood the smile. Slowly, it relaxed. The other children followed. One by one, the rescue team picked up the children and carried them toward the exit. They were careful. They were gentle. Some of the volunteers were crying inside their helmets, but their hands were steady. On the surface, the alien ships were watching through cameras and scanners. They saw the humans carrying the Keth children through the deadly tunnels. They saw Hajin sharing her last chocolate with alien strangers. They saw the rescue team going back into the darkness again and again. Admiral Thelos stood frozen at his command screen. His compound eyes were wide. "They found survivors," his officer reported in disbelief. "I can see that," Thelos said quietly. "They went into lethal radiation for Keth children." Keth, a species they barely know. A species that has no alliance with them. "I can see that too." The officer turned to look at his admiral. "Sir, why would they do that?" Thelos did not answer. He had no answer. In all his years of study, in all his careful calculations, he had never accounted for this. He had never imagined that any species would risk certain death for strangers. But the humans were not imagining it. They were doing it. Back in the tunnels, Yuna's team had found more survivors. A group of Velrani workers trapped behind a fallen beam. A Marath elder too weak to move. Dozens of mixed species, all terrified, all waiting to die. "How many more?" Dohan asked. "Thousands," Yuna replied. "We've barely started." Dohan looked at his radiation readings. They were already dangerously high. "We can't save everyone. Watch us," Yuna said, and she walked back into the darkness. 18 hours had passed since the Defiance landed on Vexor 7. 18 hours of endless work, endless danger, endless miracles. The humans had pulled over 8,000 survivors from the tunnels. 8,000 lives that the galaxy had already written off as lost, but it was not enough. There were still thousands more trapped deep inside. And now, the real problem had arrived. "The reactor is failing faster than we thought," Dohan reported. His voice was tired and rough. He had not slept in over 30 hours. "We have maybe 6 hours before total meltdown." Yuna looked at the data on her cracked tablet. The numbers were bad. Worse than bad. The reactor's containment was breaking down. When it failed completely, the explosion would kill everyone still on the planet. Survivors, rescuers, everyone. "Can we stop it?" she asked. Dohan hesitated. That hesitation told her everything she needed to know. "There's one option," he finally said. "I can rig a cooling system using our ship's water reserves. It might buy us enough time to get everyone out." "Do it." "Commander." Dohan paused. "Someone has to operate the system manually." From inside the reactor chamber, The radiation in there it's lethal. Guaranteed lethal. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what he was saying. Someone had to go into that chamber. Someone had to sacrifice themselves to save everyone else. Una started to speak, but another voice cut her off. I'll do it. Everyone turned. It was Tayson, the 19-year-old kid from the academy. His face was pale and covered in dust. His hands were shaking slightly, but his eyes were steady. No, Una said immediately. Absolutely not. Commander, please listen. Tayson stepped forward. I'm the smallest person on the team. I can fit through the access shaft fastest. And he swallowed hard. I'm the most expendable. I don't have any special skills. I'm just extra hands. There is no such thing as expendable, Una said firmly. Every life has value. Every life has value. Your life has value. I know that. I do. Tayson's voice cracked slightly, but he kept going. But those people down there have families, children. They have whole lives waiting for them. If I can give them that chance by going into that chamber, then that's what I want to do. Una stared at him. For a moment, she saw him as he really was. Not a scared kid. Not an inexperienced rookie, but a brave young man who was willing to give everything for strangers. You're not going alone, she said quietly. Tayson blinked. What? If you're going into that chamber, I'm going with you. Una stood up straight. A commander doesn't send her crew into danger alone. Commander, that's not up for discussion. From across the bridge, another voice spoke up. I'm coming too. It was Myra, the cook. She was covered in grease and dust, her apron torn and dirty. She looked completely out of place in this crisis. But there was iron in her voice. Myra, you're a cook, Dowan said gently. This isn't. I know what I am, Myra interrupted. But I'm also the best person on this ship at keeping people calm. And if those two are going into a death trap, they're going to need someone to keep their spirits up. She smiled her warm kitchen smile. Besides, I tell great jokes. Nobody laughed, but nobody argued either. 3 of them. Commander Una, young Tayson, and Mira the cook. They suited up in the heaviest radiation gear available. It would not save them from a lethal dose, but it might keep them alive long enough to finish the job. The walk to the reactor chamber was the longest of their lives. The tunnels grew hotter with every step. The walls glowed with deadly energy. Their suits beeped constant warnings that they all ignored. Hey, Myra said suddenly. Did you hear about the Keth who walked into a human bar? Tayson looked at her in disbelief. Seriously? Now? Best time for jokes is when things are terrible. So, this Keth walks into a bar and asks for water. The bartender says, still or sparkling? The Keth says, swimming, actually. Do you have a pool? There was a pause. Then, Tayson laughed. It was a small, surprised laugh, but it was real. That's terrible, he said. I have worse ones, Myra promised. Even Una smiled. They reached the reactor chamber. The door was jammed, bent by heat and pressure. Together, the 3 of them forced it open. Inside was hell. The temperature was unbearable. The radiation was so strong that their suits started failing immediately. At the center of the room, a massive pipe needed to be operated by hand. Turn the valve and the cooling system would activate. The reactor would stabilize. Everyone would live, but the person at the valve would die. I'll do it, Tayson said, stepping forward. We'll do it together, Una corrected. She positioned herself beside him. Myra, keep talking, right? Mira took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking badly now. Okay, so there's this human and a Velrani on a spaceship. Tayson grabbed the valve. It was burning hot even through his gloves. He screamed but didn't let go. Yuna added her strength to his. Together, they started to turn. A pipe burst overhead. Boiling steam shot down toward Tayson. Without thinking, Yuna threw herself over him, shielding his body with hers. The steam hit her back. She felt pain unlike anything she had ever experienced. But she didn't move. "Keep turning," she shouted. Tayson turned. Tears were streaming down his face inside his helmet. He could barely see. He could barely breathe. But he kept turning. "And the Vulrani says," Myra continued, her voice breaking, "I calculated that joke would be funny, but I appear to have made an error." The valve clicked into place. The cooling system activated. Throughout the colony, temperature readings started dropping. The countdown stopped. The reactor stabilized. On the surface, the watching aliens saw everything through helmet cameras. They saw Yuna collapse, her back badly burned. They saw Tayson fall to his knees, crying and laughing at the same time. They saw Myra finish her terrible joke, even as she helped drag her crewmates toward safety. Admiral Thalos had not spoken in hours. He stood at his screen, watching 3 humans who should have been dead save thousands of lives through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. "Impossible," he whispered. His officer looked at him. "Sir, I said that was impossible. The radiation levels, the heat, the structural damage. By every calculation, they should have died before reaching that valve. But they didn't die, sir." "No." Thalos slowly shook his head. "No, they didn't." Back in the tunnels, rescue teams were flooding in to help the 3 heroes. Tayson was unconscious but alive. Mira was talking nonstop, probably in shock. And Yuna, despite burns that would have killed most species, was trying to stand up. "Stay down, Commander," Hajin ordered as she rushed to help. "Can't," Yuna mumbled. "Still people in the tunnels. Have to finish." "It's handled. The cooling system bought us time. Everyone is getting out." Yuna relaxed slightly. Just slightly. "Good," she whispered. "That's good." Then she finally let herself close her eyes. 51 hours after the Defiance first received a distress signal, the last survivor was pulled from the tunnels of Vexor 7. Her name was Bora. She was a 3-year-old Keth girl who had been hiding in a storage closet for 2 days. When the human rescuer found her, she was clutching a small toy and crying for her mother. The rescuer picked her up gently. "It's okay, little one," he said in words she could not understand. "We've got you now." He carried her to the surface where her mother was waiting. The reunion was something that needed no translation. Some things are the same in every language. Final count: 11,847 survivors, out of 12,000 colonists. The ones who died had been killed in the initial explosion, before the humans ever arrived. Everyone who was still alive when the Defiance landed was now safe. The human crew, all 42 still breathing. 19 of them were in serious condition from radiation exposure. Commander Yuna had 3rd-degree burns covering her back. Tayson had damage to his lungs from the reactor chamber. Myra had broken 3 ribs at some point and hadn't even noticed until the rescue was over. All of them would recover. It would take months, but they would recover. The Defiance itself was not so lucky. The ship had given everything it had. Its reactor was drained. Its hull was cracked beyond repair. Its systems were burned out from overuse. It would never fly again, but its crew was alive. And so were nearly 12,000 people who should have been dead. Admiral Thalos requested permission to board the wreck of the Defiance. He walked through its damaged corridors with slow, careful steps. His compound eyes took in every detail. The torn metal, the bloodstains, the repair jobs held together with tape and hoped he found Dowan in what remained of engineering. The tall man was still working, even now. He was running final shutdowns on systems that would never run again. "Chief Engineer," Thalos said formally. "May I speak with you?" Dowan looked up. His eyes were red from exhaustion. His hands were covered in burns and cuts. But he managed a tired smile. "Sure, Admiral. What can I do for you?" Thalos hesitated. He had prepared a speech, a logical, orderly explanation of why he had come. But standing here, in this broken ship, surrounded by evidence of impossible courage, his speech felt small and meaningless. "I need to understand," he finally said. "Your commander said, 'We've got this,' before you had any plan. Before you had analyzed the situation. Before you had any reasonable chance of success. How did she know you would succeed?" Dowan leaned back against a damaged console. He thought about the question for a long moment. "She didn't know," he said at last. The lost blinked. "I do not understand." "That's not what the phrase means, Admiral. 'We've got this' isn't a prediction. It's not a calculation. It's a promise. A promise of what? A promise that we won't give up. That we'll try everything we have, give everything we are, until we either succeed or we physically can't continue anymore. The universe doesn't get to decide when we quit. We decide. And we decided those people were going to live." Thalos was silent for a long time. "But the mathematics," he said slowly. "The odds. Everything said you would fail." "Yeah, well," Dowan shrugged. "Odds are just numbers. Numbers don't account for what people can do when they refuse to accept them. This is illogical. Probably." Dowan smiled. "But those 12,000 survivors don't care about logic. They're just happy to be alive." Thalos looked down at his long, thin hands. In his entire life, he had never done anything without first calculating the probability of success. He had never attempted anything that mathematics said was impossible. He had never risked everything on nothing but determination and hope. "We've got this," he repeated slowly, testing the strange human words. "You're getting it," Dowan said. 3 days later, the Galactic Coalition released its official report on the Vexor 7 incident. It was 400 pages long. It contained detailed analysis of the rescue operation. It broke down every improvised solution the humans had invented. It calculated the exact probabilities they had overcome. But the section that spread across the galaxy, the part that was translated into every language and taught in every school, was a single paragraph at the end. When asked how they accomplished the impossible, the humans did not cite superior technology, advanced training, or unique biological advantages. They cited a simple phrase that translates imperfectly into most coalition languages, but can be approximately understood as, "We've got this." Analysis suggests this phrase indicates not certainty of success, but certainty of effort. The humans did not know they would succeed. They simply refused to accept that failure was the only option. This refusal, preliminary studies suggest, may be the defining characteristic of their species. The Keth traders closed their betting pools. The old Keth who had refused to bet against the humans just smiled and said nothing. The Morth added the recordings of the rescue to their most sacred historical archives. They placed them alongside the birth of stars and the treaties that had ended ancient wars. "This," they declared, "is what courage looks like." And throughout the galaxy, something began to change. When things looked impossible, when the odds were overwhelming, when logic said to give up and accept the inevitable, beings of all species started to pause. They started to think about 42 humans who had flown into certain death and come out alive. They started to remember a woman with burns on her back who had shielded a frightened boy. A cook who told terrible jokes in a room full of radiation. A young man who volunteered to die for strangers. And slowly, carefully, they started to say it. In their own languages. In their own ways. With their own meanings. We've got this. On Earth, Commander Yuna received a message from Admiral Thalos. It was short. Commander, I have been thinking about our conversation before your rescue attempt. You said you would do the impossible. I told you that you would fail. I was wrong. I have learned something from your species. Something I do not fully understand yet, but something I believe is valuable. I have learned that the impossible is only impossible until someone refuses to believe it. Thank you for teaching me this. Perhaps someday my species will learn to say, we've got this as well. Until then, I will be watching. With great respect, Admiral Thalos. Yuna read the message from her hospital bed. Beside her, Tayson was sleeping peacefully. Across the room, Mira was telling her terrible jokes to a group of young Keth children who did not understand a word but laughed anyway at her expressions. Yuna smiled and closed her eyes. They had done the impossible. They had saved 12,000 lives. They had changed how the galaxy thought about humanity. And they had done it the only way humans knew how. Together. Because when humans said, we've got this, they meant it with every cell of their bodies and every beat of their hearts. The universe, finally, was starting to believe them.